The wedding between Storm and Black Panther was a major comic book event in the Marvel Universe that was a little extra special because of the series crossover. Storm being a popular and prominent character in X-Men, while Black Panther being the main man in his own issues. I mean, crossovers at Marvel have always been a staple, but marriages, that's taking it to another level. Comic book relationships generally stick to their own serialization, like Mr. Fantastic and Invisible Woman of Fantastic Four, and Jean Grey and Cyclops of X-Men. Containing lovebirds to one story makes it much easier for consistency's sake, but Storm and Black Panther's deep connection made for an exception. Both come from royal African descent, have ties to their own respected gods, have powers that lead them to be heroes, fought at different times as members of the Avengers, and they've actually known each other longer than many of you would think. Storm's family tree is a lot simpler than her husband's side, though her upbringing was chaotic. She wasn't always known as Storm. That codename didn't come until she joined the X-Men. She was born Ororo Munroe. Her mother's side of the family is considerably unique. They originate from a remote location in Kenya, a country in Africa, and they rule over a village as sorceress, priestess, royalty. The female line passes down the unique traits of white hair and blue eyes, something you don't see every day in Africa, along with a strong affinity towards magic. It seems like this has to do with a goddess in the Marvel Universe called STOR, favoring this family for some reason. Storm's grandmother is the queen of the hidden Kenyan village, who can use some forms of magic, and she's still around in the current story, though we don't know her name or who she married. Her daughter, Ndare, had no interest in this role that was forced on her as princess. She rebelled and left Kenya for America, where she would meet her husband, David Munroe, a photojournalist. While living in New York, they had their first and only child, Ororo, but soon after her birth, they moved to Cairo in Egypt. Ndare had a change of heart about living in America, after witnessing firsthand how bad the racism was. She was treated badly in New York, while in Africa, she would be a queen. There was a job offer for David in Cairo, so they went. This is where her parents would have their lives cut short. When Ororo was 6, a plane was shot down and crashed into their home. She was the only survivor, becoming an orphan during a dangerous war period in Egypt. The accident that buried her in rubble left her with a serious case of claustrophobia that has stayed with her. She never learned the truth about her royal ties, or got to know her relatives on her father's side. Storm never got to meet her grandmother until her adult years, when she went exploring her roots in the 2006 issue of Uncanny X-Men. She didn't even know her mother had an older brother. Colonel Shitani hated the women of his family. They get all the love, powers, and praise, while he, being the firstborn, wouldn't even inherit rule over the village. He forcibly took over their homeland after Ndare left for America, and planned on killing her and Ororo if they ever returned. And she would one day find her way here, but it's not like he can do anything against one of the most powerful mutants on Earth. But before her powers manifested, she was one of the begging children in Cairo, who had no home or any guidance. A man named Ahmed El-Gabar was recruiting all these kids with nowhere to go to be part of his band of thieves. He would become Ororo's father figure during these formative years, and a foster parent to all the thieving brats. Considering he was a criminal, he treated all of them well, and Ororo was fond of him during her time in Cairo. It would be during her time pickpocketing tourists that she would come across Professor Xavier for the first time. He seemed to be an easy target at first, but then everything froze, which scared the hell out of Ororo, and he left with his wallet. She obviously didn't know what happened at the time, because of her being unaware of mutant powers. Even before her powers manifested, Xavier sensed what she was, but let the girl be without telling her. There's been a few retellings of her backstory, but they all generally tell the same story about what happens next. After a dream, Ororo has the realization that there's more for her life, so at 12, she says goodbye to her thief master and heads out into the desert alone. At 12. Don't know many 12-year-old preteens that can do that. Her instincts were telling her to head further south. Her deep bond with the earth, because of her abilities, were probably guiding her to her homeland in Kenya. During these travels, her powers manifest. Right before a storm was about to kill her, she breaks it apart, calming the winds and saving her own life. A band of thugs realized what Ororo is and try to kidnap her. This is where she meets T'Challa for the first time, who would later be known as Black Panther. He was roaming these lands as a rite of passage for Wakanda's royal line. He was the prince, next in line to rule over the most advanced civilization in the world, but you wouldn't be able to tell by his tribal attire. Before he's given his suit and powers, T'Challa saves Ororo with his strength alone, and she in turn saves him when they came back for revenge. People began to view Ororo as a goddess, since she can manipulate the weather. Her mutant ability is so broad that the many different writers for the X-Men comics have some creative liberty with what she can actually do. Aside from the regular old wind, rain, lightning, mist control you see in a bunch of different works, there was a panel in one of the Extreme X-Men issues where she separated oxygen and hydrogen with electrolysis so she and the people around her could breathe underwater. She can sense and see things that no one else can, so unlimited possibilities here. There's a reason why she's considered not only one of the most powerful mutants, but just beings in general, when considering her unexplored magic and goddess potential. So a bunch of little tribes and villages begin to worship Ororo, and she does what she can to help them out, but also knowing that providing rain for areas in drought can have serious repercussions. She learned that the hard way when messing with the ecosystem. Led to the deaths of a lot of animals. But for a little while, Ororo and T'Challa share a romance in Africa that has to come to an end when he has to return to Wakanda and perform his duties as prince. So Ororo continues on her journey until she finally makes it to Kenya. Not quite her mother's hidden village, but close enough. Here, she was raised by the priestess Ainet. She was also a magic user, but not to the extent of Ororo's family. What I find interesting is that the ability to manipulate weather is a recurring theme in the female line of her family. The blue-eyed, white-haired sorceress has been commonly called Wind Rider throughout history, but it's hard to say whether they are all mutants like Ororo or just magic users, which is a very real thing in the Marvel Universe. With Professor Xavier being able to mentally sense all mutants, he comes in contact with Ororo once again, years after their first encounter. This time to recruit her as a superhero to help save the world. She knew she was destined for more than just being worshipped, so she took him up on his offer and moved back to New York, taking up the name Storm. It would be a while before she returned to Africa again, but when she did, she'd be reunited with T'Challa. Their relationship reignited. Soon he would propose, and then marry. But there was one test Storm would have to pass in order to become the Queen of Wakanda. To be accepted into the royal family, she would need approval from their Panther god. But who wouldn't approve of a powerful and compassionate character who already knew a thing or two about leading? T'Challa has always admired her talent, and his people followed, so she, once again, would be elevated to the status of goddess. Ororo lived her life without a family, but now things were different in Wakanda. So remember when I said that T'Challa's family tree is a little complicated? Well, it starts off a little messy because of retcons by writers from different eras. While in the 90s, Marvel detailed the backstory for his grandfather, Shonda, who lived during the time of World War II. In the more recent comics, his grandfather's name is Azuri. Not sure what's the deal behind the change, but it isn't a big deal, I guess. In both backstories, he ruled as a Black Panther of Wakanda. His sons were T'Chaka and Sion. Firstborn and heir, T'Chaka fell in love with a common girl named Nyami, who was an expert at molding vibranium, the sacred metal from a meteor that the Wakandan royal family guard over. The small country was an isolationist kingdom, but something unexpected happened 12 years before T'Challa was born. A plane crashed near Wakanda territory, killing everyone on board, except for one, a small infant child who happened to be white. When presented to T'Chaka, he decided to take in the child as his son. The newlyweds named him Hunter. Many looked at him like an outsider, but Hunter truly felt like the king's son, until T'Challa was born 12 years later. A legitimate heir meant Hunter would be pushed aside and given way less attention. To make things worse, their mother, Nyami, died a week later from an illness she had while pregnant. He still loved his father and his kingdom, but he did have some resentment and jealousy towards his adopted brother, T'Challa. He would never become the next Black Panther, but he did train to the point of becoming exceptionally skilled. Impressed by his son, T'Chaka made Hunter the head of the secret police of Wakanda that took care of the kingdom's enemies and potential threats. He would have the nickname White Wolf. While inspecting the border with his father, a young T'Challa got lost and was only reunited with the king with the help of an outsider named Ramonda. She was from South Africa and left her home during the tough times that place went through. T'Chaka made an exception for Ramonda and offered her a home in Wakanda for finding his son. She would care for him as a mother figure since she died after he was born. Soon enough, she and the king fell in love and got married. She would be the mother of the next child, a daughter named Shuri.
This corset is really uncomfortable. So could we all just wrap it up and go home? Hey, Shmata!
Sometime between his 2 marriages, King T'Chaka had one other child, this time with a Wakandan spy who worked to keep their technological advancements and resources a secret from the world. Matina did this by traveling around doing spy stuff. Their son was the middle child, Jakara. It seems like aspects of the Killmonger character in the Black Panther movie were inspired by this character.
Hey, Auntie.
Jakara was raised outside of Wakanda and traveled here after the death of their father. T'Chaka was killed by Claw, so a change was made for the movies. Claw wanted the vibranium and T'Chaka said no, so he killed him. He's always been a major antagonist in the Black Panther world. Jakara would also turn into a villain. With T'Chaka dead and T'Challa too young to rule, his uncle, Sion, became the regent until he was of age. This usually ends badly in stories, but his uncle was a cool guy, not like the uncle in the movie. T'Challa challenged his uncle in that fight tournament ritual and became the next king in Black Panther. He and Storm would never have children, and their marriage wouldn't last long. After a fight between the X-Men and Avengers, Storm siding with the X-Men, and Black Panther, the Avengers. But who knows what will happen between them in the future. It's not like these comics are stopping anytime soon, with Black Panther now being more popular than ever. But in X-Men's notorious plethora of alternate universes, there are some children between the two, even a kid between Storm and Wolverine, who got blessed with powers from both parents. There's an intense-looking character named Alexander Nathaniel Summers, better known as Major X, who's the son of Storm and Cable. That's as comic booky of a couple as it gets. Since Cable is the future child of Jean Grey and Cyclops, there's no topping that. So I'll end this family tree here. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll leave a link to all the other X-Men family tree videos I have up. I'll see y'all soon.